Hey everyone, Cannon here again. For this week's lesson, we're going to take a look at some more soloing concepts. Now last week we looked at playing over changes, how to make your playing fit over different key and chord changes and things like that. Well, for this week we're going to take a look at something pretty opposite. How to make your playing fit over a rather static, basic, chugging on the low root kind of progression that you might find in a lot of rock and metal stuff, specifically more modern, dare I say, djenty metal. That kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you a short piece, or an excerpt from a longer piece actually, that I've come up with, and it's a solo over a very low string chuggy kind of progression that doesn't leave much in the way of harmonic information like the bigger chords did in last week's piece. I'll show you that, I'll show you how I approached it, how I came up with some of the different licks and ideas and break it down, and how you can apply it to your own playing, as well as how you can develop ideas over more sparse arrangements like this. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the rhythm part real fast. Like I said, it's a very simple riff focused around this low open A power chord, since I am in drop A on the 7th string. So I'll play through the part real fast and I'll explain how it works. Okay, so the notes that I'm highlighting in those little runs that I'm doing, the first 3 times are the octave, the raised 7th, since we're kind of giving it a harmonic minor feel, and then this minor 6. It's very much emphasizing half steps and minor 3rd movement, giving it that heavy, dark kind of feel because of that. Then on the 4th time around, it goes to this, which you'll notice hits the minor 7th instead of the raised 7th, so it implies natural minor again. So there's this little kind of ambiguity to the way that the riff is written, and you'll find this in a lot of modern metal. It doesn't necessarily conform to a particular key, and it's very open and hits a lot of passing tones or chromatic notes that might throw things off for what you're doing as a lead player. So I'll explain next how I work around that with the solo. Okay, now on to the solo. It opens up with a little turnaround lick on the last part of one of those parts. And so in order to highlight that F that's being hit there, all the notes I'm playing fit into a nice harmony over that. We have, which is a minor 3rd above F. It's a major 3rd above F, which gives a nice little ambiguous feel there between major and minor. Which is a 5th above F, which is a 6th, major 6, which brings us back to the 5th, and back to the major 3rd. So basically my approach to that lick was making sure that all of the notes I was playing had some kind of relation to that F that was being played. Would this lick necessarily sound good if it was being played over the A? Not as good, because I'm hitting that D in there, which is the fourth in relation to A and wouldn't necessarily sound that good to be held. Now you could play it as a passing tone, it would sound okay, but since what I'm playing, it has more of a consonant relationship with the F than it would with the A. That's a way you can kind of focus on the movement that's happening in a riff if it's highlighting a particular note, even though the main feel of the progression might not be highlighting that root, or highlighting that note as the root, I should say. Because again, with this kind of stuff, it's very ambiguous. You can approach it a lot of different ways, and the way that you play the solo majorly impacts how the progression below it is perceived and the overall feel of everything. Since there's very sparse harmony going on in the rhythm guitar, you as the lead player are responsible for a lot more of it. On to the next part, we have the main kind of riff motif, whatever you want to call it, that's repeated and used as the anchor point for the solo, the catchy bit, if you will. And it's centered around an A minor arpeggio. The other notes that I'm hitting are highlighting notes that give it the kind of feel that I want. In this case, I'm highlighting that raised seventh for the harmonic minor feel. The fourth for the tension and slight dissonance that imparts. And then the minor sixth, once again highlighting the whole minor dark sound like that. So you end up with that kind of thing. Very bouncy, but it's bouncing around the chord that I'm wanting to imply, while also hitting the extensions that imply the kind of feel that I want beyond the basic root third fifth of the chord. Moving on to the first proper shreddy lick, I based it off of that very opening lick, the tonality between, or how I played it. I took that same tonality, moving it up to this octave, and played it like this. See? Same tones there, it's just being used differently. And then for the last half of that measure, I'm highlighting the fifth. Fifth. By having that kind of recurring harmonic, melodic thing, it just gives you something to grab onto. It gives familiarity. You can get away with a lot of different licks, a lot of different ideas, as long as you have some kind of harmonic center to tie them all together. On to the next lick, which is again a variation on the tonality from before, with a slight shift. Instead of focusing on that raised seventh, we're going to throw the second in there instead to get our little rolling pattern that we need for these kinds of 6-note per grouping licks. So we open up again with the, and from there we have a kind of pedal point thing that moves from the fourth to the fifth to the sixth to the raised seventh. That gives movement, moving up even farther into the range, because if you've noticed, I've kind of kept climbing through the range of the guitar as the solo has gone on, gives movement continuing to ascend, while that little pedal point idea of having that repeating gives you, once again, something to grab onto that's familiar. On to the next section, we find a slightly more jumbled about, but still ultimately recall to the melodic idea from before, that A minor, while highlighting the raised seventh, the sixth, and the fourth. Instead of playing it down here, I play it like this up here. Again, it's not the same, it's not like just a different octave from before, but it's using the same exact tones. On to the next section. We're continuing with highlighting those tones from before as we move down with some slidey, bendy, phrasey bits. And then ascend with some slidey, bendy, phrasey bits as well. Once again, I'm highlighting that raised 7th, the minor 6th, and the 4th as I'm moving through something basically based around that A minor arpeggio ultimately. And now on to the final lick, the why did I write this and do this to myself so that I had to play it lick. I do that to myself pretty often. What this is based around is that same tonality from before. You see, we're keeping that steady theme of A minor arpeggio with the raised 7th, minor 6th, and 4th, highlighting that kind of dark harmonic minor feel. But for this run, at the very beginning, I throw in a natural 7th, a minor 7th I should say, as well as a flat 5. I also throw in a flat 5 in the form of arpeggio at the very end of the run. Again, I'm just, by having that chromatic movement and those really dark, dissonant, evil sounding tones, can never go wrong with a flat 5 with a tritone. I'm just trying to really, really build as much tension as possible with this ending lick at the end of the solo. Now on to the last bendy, slidey bit, big into the solo. As I said before, I was moving through the range of the guitar upwards for the most part, in general fashion, as I was playing the solo. Well, we've now reached doing some bends on the 22nd fret of the high E. Now, once again, I'm highlighting those wonderful, wonderful A tones, though I am moving pretty linearly through it here as I play the bends. So I'm hitting that 5th and that 6th. And then we move down here to the 3rd, bend up to the 4th, and then down to the 2nd, and that's what I hold on. By holding in that 2nd, it just kind of gives the suspenseful feel at the very end of the solo for the chorus, if you want to call it that, to come back in, without it being really, really dark and not resolving so much as like hitting a flat 5 or the raised 7th would in that particular case. It's still not totally resolved. There's still tension there, but it's kind of benign, pleasant tension as opposed to the more aggressive, evil sounding tension of the other tones. Now then, as far as how to approach using these kinds of concepts in your own playing, your own writing, how to apply them over both written and improvisational context, one thing I find really helpful is getting a goal in mind from the outset. I want this song to have, or this solo to have this tonality, or I want it to move through this tonality and this tonality if you want to do modulations, which we didn't get into here today. We can get into it at a later date using pitch axis, all that wonderful stuff. So really you want to have a clear idea of what kind of sound you want out of your solo. Like I said in the beginning of the video, when you have sparse rhythm that's not giving you that much harmonically to work with, it's up to you as the soloist to provide a lot more of that harmonic content than you might normally. You don't play around what's there so much as build upon what's there. That's the wheelhouse of guys who play modally like Satriani and Vai, who just move through all these different key centers and can modulate over the same root while moving through those different kinds of centers. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach this kind of stuff. In this context, I chose a very metal approach of having a static key and playing around that key and using some dark, evil sounding extensions, some chromaticism, some lots of half step and minor third movement to give the kind of feel I wanted. I could just as easily have said, you know what, I want to be weird and have the first half of each repetition be major key and then just shift into minor when the progression forces me to. I could do that if I really wanted to. It'd be hard to make it work, but I could do it. So it's really down to how you want to sound over what you're playing. You want to have a very clear idea of the sound you want from the outset, because otherwise, without the rhythm guitar to do that work for you, it can end up sounding kind of aimless if you're just kind of drifting around and just kind of shifting through the different scales and modes that fit with it without really committing to one or having a clear picture of when you're making the change from one to another. Alrighty then, once again, that should just about wrap up this week's lesson. I hope I was able to show you some different ways you can apply these kinds of concepts over your own writing and playing, how you can kind of get outside and have some fun with tonalities and do some different things when you have a rather sparse rhythm over which to put your lead playing, and how you can possibly write these kinds of sparse chord progressions to give yourself room as an improviser or just as a writer in general to have some more space with your leads. So, as always, I hope you had fun with it. Thanks again.